Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining our September Analytic Tableau user group. So today we have like a cool panel of speakers, and Sedale will introduce them to you, but just some word about what is this Analytic Tableau user group. It's all about analytic across the entire Tableau platform, so whether Tableau desktop, web edit, or as data. So what we prefer is to do demos in Tableau. And from time to time, we also have the Tableau team coming up and show the new analytic feature. So make sure to subscribe to our analytic user group if you want to get the new announcements when we met. And we also have a page on the forum, on the Tableau forum, where you can also ask questions. And I always post like the material there. Plus, I also send some email after that. So who are we? We are three leaders. We have Samantha, who is leading from Brisbane. She will do like a session next time with Sedale at a different time zone. So it's APAC and US friendly. We have Sedale, who is here with me today, who is a digital insight analyst at Purple Strategy, and myself, Annabelle Rincon. I'm working from Switzerland. So Sedale, here in this slide, you know everything about him. He's a Tableau specialist, a Tableau feature author. He's very involved on the community equity task force. He's very passionate about Tableau and data, otherwise he will not be there today. And yeah, what he likes, he's like to drink wine and watch sport, almost like me. We need to meet in person, Sedale. Myself, I'm leading the Tableau Center of Enablement for a Swiss bank. I'm also co-leading Data Plus Women Zurich session, plus this one, and I have the chance to have been named Visionary and Ambassador. And yes, that's everything. I have a sweet tooth. I like sweets and chocolate. And we have, last but not least, Samantha, who is here on the slide. And you see that, yeah, like I said, she's original from Australia. She likes data strategy, workbook, and Nintendo. I really like her this, by the way. So you will hear from her like next month, in 1 month. So the ground rule for today is really enjoy. Don't try to take notes, just enjoy. This session is being recorded. You will find it after on Tableau on the YouTube channel. We will send an email. We will publish it in social media, so you will not miss the recording at all. If you want to speak between yourself and say hello, where you are coming from, please use the chat. If you have a question for our speaker, use the Q&A box. It will be our pleasure to answer it during the presentation. So now I will let Sedale presenting our awesome speaker, and I just wish you like a good session. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Annabelle. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for indulging us on the questions, and we'll definitely do more research. It seems like there's a couple of hurricanes that have been out there. Hopefully everybody is staying safe, of course. So we've got two awesome sessions. These are both sessions that are from TC, and they were awesome sessions. If you weren't able to make it in person, this is a great way to catch up on that content. So we've got two from two pairs, Sam Parsons and Simon. We'll talk about building beautiful business dashboards, and the Flerlage twins will talk about all sorts of cool stuff that you can do in Tableau. We will start though with Sam and Simon. Sam is a two-time Tableau visionary and senior analytics consultant at BizStory, which is one of the premier Tableau partners. He does quite a bit in using Tableau every day to continually push visualization for the benefit of his clients. I think most people have seen visits of his. He's gotten multiple visits of the days. So we can see he continues to do that very well. In his spare time, he provides feedback to the Datafam a lot via Twitter. If you're on Twitter, definitely follow him. Gets creative with his children and trains his two Saint Berdoodle dogs. I assume that's a mix of two things. and I think he can clarify that. Simon, also a Tableau visionary, excuse me, it's a typo from an old slide, social ambassador and JLL's global BI director. I've talked ad nauseum about JLL and all the cool people there. So Simon is yet another one of those here to talk with us today. Simon's been using Tableau for 6 years, loves sports and Tableau, brings them together through Sports Viz Sunday, and also is very active on Twitter as well. So with that, I'll let Simon and Sam talk a bit more about themselves and then tell us how to build beautiful business dashboards.
Excellent, thank you. I'll just share my screen.
Can't believe you're showing your webcam and you're not expecting me to not comment on the dresses behind you.
Let's not draw attention to the dresses.
Why not?
They are my wife's, for anybody who's wondering. Can you actually see my screen?
We can see it, Sam.
Okay, great. I'm gonna just put it into full screen and we'll start, I guess.
Cool. So welcome everyone to Beautiful Business Dashboards, the how and the why. And Sedale, thank you for the really kind intro. As you said, this was a talk that Sam and I did at Tableau conference in Vegas earlier this year. And we're delighted to be the first user group to do this virtually outside of conference. So just quick intros in terms of speakers, and I won't dwell too much on this because Sedale's already done a great job introducing us, but Sam, I've known Sam for years now, 2 times Tableau visionary and leads the Southwest Tableau user group, but probably the thing that I would say Sam is most well known for is his amazing designs. He was an INVIS 2021 finalist, and the feeder that year that he did on the Marvel Rivers of Time was absolutely incredible. And I sincerely hope it gets not just longlisted, but shortlisted at the Info is Beautiful Awards this year, because I think it's an absolutely fantastic viz. So Sam, good luck on that one.
Thanks, Simon. So obviously I get to introduce Simon. As Simon said, we've known each other for a long time, since the start of my journey with Tableau. Simon's the Global BI Director of JLL. JLL, if people are unaware, are a very Datafam heavy organization. They completely embrace Tableau and they have a high number of Datafam stars in their collection, and that's mostly down to Simon going out and basically acting like a Pokemon trainer and collecting them all. He's a 4-time Tableau visionary and many-time Tableau ambassador. He helps run the Sports Viz Sunday, and sports is where his passion really lies. I would really encourage you all to go and have a look at Simon's Tableau public profile, and you'll see the sort of mastery that he applies to sporting data along with other data as well. And like myself, Simon was also an INVIS finalist in the year before myself, and he was also runner-up. Sticking with me, I'm going to take you through what we're going to do in this session today. So what we're going to try and do is we're going to do a little bit of theory work around what Simon and I believe makes a beautiful dashboard. And we're going to try and give a lot of detail around how you can make your dashboards beautiful in our the way that we term what is a beautiful dashboard. And also, hopefully, you'll take that away and we'll give you some reasons why you would want to apply that theory work to your own dashboards in your business. And then we're going to move into a slightly different part of the session, which is going to be more like INVIS. We're going to go into a live build. I will play that role of the INVIS contestant, so I'll be building out some charts live. And Simon will adopt the role of the supervisor, where he'll talk through what's happening on screen. So it should be quite a fun session, and sometimes it goes wrong, sometimes it goes well. It all depends on how well Simon can keep up with what I'm doing on the screen. And then if you're still with us and you still want to learn a little bit more, we've got some inspiration for where you can continue your learning. So Simon.
Thank you, Sam. And I apologise, my internet has just gone a little bit unstable, so if I do pause, it will only be for a second and I will be back. But we will start with, what do we mean by beautiful? So clearly 6 foot, English, bald. No, sorry, I'm only joking. They'll be the first of some many bad gags. So we really want to be able to give you the detail of understanding what we mean by beautiful, not just in terms of a particular color, but more about design choices. So let's jump into first what beautiful isn't. And I think it's a really critical concept that a beautiful dashboard doesn't need to be complex. We are not saying that to be beautiful, you've got to do Sankey's, you've got to do chord charts. Yes, they will have their place, but fundamentally, we believe that simple charts are the best charts, because when a chart is done well, that can be beautiful because it provides the insights that your external or your users need. Of course, there are many examples on Tableau Public of external formatting and imagery adding value to a dashboard or to a data viz, and that's completely appropriate, but in a business setting, we don't want to distract the end user. We want the end user to be centered on insights. And often if you put imagery or put formatting, whilst it will attract the eye, it will attract the eye to the wrong thing, which will be the imagery, not the data and insights. And on a similar fashion, we would say, don't add custom or multiple different types of fonts. Challenge yourself, does it add any value? If you've got consistency, then you're allowing your users again to focus on the data rather than ask themselves, why have I got 5 different fonts? Does it mean anything? If you keep it consistent, you keep the user experience consistent. And lastly, we would challenge you to suggest that more is not necessarily better. So just because you can refill the screen doesn't mean that you should do. Every single element that you add to Tableau and you add to a dashboard, you should always challenge yourself to say, does that add any value? So all of these concepts above, they may be attention grabbing. They may be appropriate for an infographic or your own personal design project, but in a business setting, focus on insights and telling your story as opposed to trying to grab people's attention. So in terms of what we believe beautiful is, we frame it in the terms of TLC. So don't go chasing waterfalls, but typography and labeling, minimizing the fonts that you use. So think about how you use the weight of the text to draw attention to your messaging. Even just putting something in bold within a title can draw your attention to that keyword. Avoid Tableau's limitations of truncation. So if you can't show a label and it truncates at the end of it, consider if you can do something else to try and make that label shorter or more coherent. And also think about the way you position your labels on the chart, not just simply putting text on the chart, but where you position your labels. Do you position at the end of a bar, the beginning of a bar? Do you show the axis, not show the axis? Moving on to the owl, think about layout and flow. So minimize the ink and optimize the white space. White space is your friend. And I will say I learned so much from Ryan Sleeper, who was a Tableau visionary many years ago when I first started Tableau. His raison d'etre was talking about white space. Use color purposefully. So if you've got multiple colors in a dashboard, think about, do they add value or do they distract? How do you use color to highlight things? Signpost interactivity. Interactivity is probably one of the most powerful elements of Tableau. And yet if you don't tell people it's there, you risk them thinking they've broken their dashboard because they click on something and it does something that they weren't expecting. So just tell them the interactivity is there to guide them through the user experience. And think about the positioning of content to emphasize the flow of analysis. We know through eye tracking studies that we go from the top left to the bottom right when someone looks at a dashboard. And that's normally the reason why a lot of your bands, your big ass numbers, are always at the top of a dashboard. That's because where you first go. And you really need to consider the flow of your data and the flow of your charts to think about how you take someone through that story. And lastly, the C, and we will emphasize this because we talked about what beautiful isn't. We honestly believe that chart types are massively important, and think about simplicity. Think about intrigue when it comes to, you want to be able to minimize the time from going to intrigue to insight in the shortest possible time. And if you use color, shapes, and interactivity, then call it out. Make it explicit so you're guiding people through their journey. Now, if you do all of that, why should you want to do it? It's not just because Sam and I are here telling you to do it. Trust me, we don't have that much influence or sway. But fundamentally, there's got to be a purpose for your end users. So yes, doing beautiful dashboards does require extra effort. We won't deny that. It's not going to be as simple as just chucking a dashboard down and saying, let's get it out there. There will always be a purpose for that very quick, agile, ad hoc analysis. But if you want to do a production dashboard and you take the time to make it beautiful, you will optimize the end user experience. You will create dashboards that are intuitive with a consistent style and flow. You will also, we think, create a subconscious trust within your consumers. So if you think about the websites that you go to, you tend to go to them because they're easy to use and they're easy to be able to guide through, and you get to where you need to get to as quickly as possible. If you take that same thought and input into your dashboards in terms of design and flow, you create credibility because every dashboard that someone experiences is the same style of experience, so they come back for more because they enjoy it. And if you declutter your dashboard and focus on making it easier to get the insights, you minimize that time to insight. Everyone these days is busy. So if you've got a business user, I can guarantee you there are probably another 10 things that they would be able to do instead of looking at a dashboard. If you can shorten the time that they need to spend looking at that dashboard to get to the insights and maximize the benefit to them, they are likely to want to come back. And that flows into our last point, which is you increase adoption and the analytical loyalty. So if you do all of this, you create that sense of, I enjoy engaging with these dashboards. I get something from it. I'm going to come back to them. And people will return to your content and you will increase adoption. And as such, you'll increase the benefit to your businesses.
Excellent. So that will draw a line under the theory section of this presentation. And now we're going to go into the fun part where we're going to try and do some live builds. So what we're going to end up doing here is we're going to take some close to show me charts from Tableau. So the show me feature in the top right-hand side that's supposed to help new people with Tableau. We're going to take some of those and we're going to turn them into some slightly improved versions of those charts. There's a couple of caveats around this. The first caveat being that the charts that we're going to do and the way we're going to improve those charts, there is an end goal in sight. And that end goal will be featured on a couple of dashboards that we're going to showcase to you and explain the build of those dashboards. And the other caveat is just because we are building these chart types in the way that we are in a minute, doesn't mean that you have to do exactly the same whenever you try to build that particular chart. There are many ways to build charts in Tableau, and the formatting of those charts and the style of those charts is all dependent on your use case. So with that, we're going to have a look at the first show me chart that we're going to try and make over. So this first chart here in the image is a nested bar chart. So if you were to select bar chart on the show me tab, you would get something similar to that. All we have done here is we've added in region to sort of break down the state's sales by each region. Now, the issue that we're seeing here is that this particular chart takes up a lot of real estate space on your dashboard. To be able to show all of the bars, you need to scroll up and down to see everything. So it's not ideal. There's also issues with some of the bars are particularly long, and that causes a lot of white space. And is that space being used in the best way? And then also the show me chart delivers a disorganized hierarchy of the text. So what I mean by that is if you look at the labels at the ends of the bars, they are bolder and bigger than the actual names of what the bars relate to, the states. That seems like a misalignment of the hierarchy there. So there's a few things going wrong with that. So I'm going to step out of presentation mode now, and we're going to all wish Simon luck to be able to keep up with the builds that I'm going to do, and wish me luck to actually get it right.
Oh, well, hands up, I did completely mess up at Tableau conference in person and forget one of the steps, so I was talking merrily along while Sam wasn't doing what I was saying he was doing. I will do my best today not to do that. Just while Sam's doing some initial steps, just to remind everyone, these aren't the only ways that you can do these charts. So we're not expecting people to follow along at every step, but we just want to give you some inspiration. So what Sam started to do here is put region into columns, because we want to create, if you like, a nested table. So we don't want the scroll. We want to create the regions across the top, and then we want to put the states into the rows. So Sam's created an index there and very quickly used the table calc to be able to do it at the state level, but reset at every region. And what that's created is we've removed the redundant white space, because we've now got a consolidated table that fits on the screen, where you've got the regions across the tops and you've got the states down the left-hand side. Sam's creating some dual axes here, and that's going to be used to allow us to label the bars and do some customization of the bars, because at the minute, yes, you can see that each bar probably is a state, but you've got no idea which state that is, and you've got no real idea of what the value is because we're still showing the axes. So we've created a secondary axis using the 0 marks pill, and we've just dropped that on and made the dual axis, and we are now starting to customize. So you can now see that on that secondary axis, we made a Gantt. We are starting to put the label of the state code, and we are starting to put the current year sales, and we are going to start to color those. And again, some of the things we're doing here, just making the lighter color draws the eye to what you want to see, which is the value, and the state value is slightly less depth in color. We're going to synchronize the axes, so then you can see, well, actually, we've still got overlapping labels here, which aren't particularly great. So we're just hiding some of the headers, and we're now going to position the labels to the left-hand side. So normally you might position it to the right-hand side, but we are deliberately choosing the left-hand side because it creates alignment. So all of a sudden you can read down, as opposed to having to go on a kind of stepped ladder of each bar and then read the end of the bar. Now that works, but you will see some subtlety in a minute of what we are going to do that tries to take that one step further. So what you've got here now is we've collapsed the horizontal or the vertical scrolling just bars. We've created it as a table, if you like, where within each region, you've got the states listed as bars, and they don't take up the whole width. They take up only their section. And we've just grounded them with a bar. But what I'm going to ask Sam to explain in a minute, because this was his genius that came up with this idea, is you will see at the minute that all of the numbers start in a slightly different place and end in a slightly different place. And the width of the states in terms of the 2-digit codes, they're all 2-digit codes, but fundamentally they are different. So one of the things that Sam is going to do first is drop a dynamic number formatting over the top of the label to get rid of, why do you need to know it's 23,484? Just know it's 23,000. And also we've got a dash to be able to symbolize where there is no sales. But Sam, can you just show people a monospacing technique, which means that alignment is taken to one step further?
You've just taken all of it away from me. You've just said it all, but okay. So what we're talking about monospacing here is we're talking about the width of the lettering. At the moment, because we've got the two letters for the states in a non-monospaced font type, what that's causing is it's causing the start of the numbers to start at different positions horizontally. So if you look at the 9.5K here, the two of them are starting in different places. So it's hard to read the length of the numbers going on here. So the easy trick to fix that is if you go into the label, you can select the state code. And if we find a monospaced font that's also works with Tableau Public, then they will all nice and neatly line up. And it's a visual, just a very nice visual sort of alignment. So now you can really see that the numbers, which numbers are bigger, and it just looks a lot neater. So quickly, just
sorry, so just one thing, that's really emphasizing the importance of visual flow. So we talked about earlier the kind of the flow of the eye. That really, it's only something really small, but we really want to emphasize the benefit of that in terms of the benefit to your end users to remove the complexity.
Yeah, just conscious of time, so we'll speed up a little bit. Because we do tend to waffle on a lot. So the next chart is the bullet chart. This is actually, believe it or not, what you get when you click on Show Me on the bullet chart. The only thing that we've done to do that is add the labels onto the bars, because sometimes you want that detail of exactly what is the what the bar value is. But the problem we're seeing here is that it's a very heavy visual load on the user. The labels are overlapping where the bars are close to the Gantt lines, makes it hard to read those labels. You're not sure certain which label belongs to which mark. There is some reference banding that's default coming behind the actual bars, which just adds to that visual load. So what we want to do is we want to sort of clean this up and make it a lot better. This one is particularly difficult for Simon to follow. And as Annabelle said at the start, we're recording it, so don't worry if you miss a few steps of what's going on.
Yeah, so I apologise in advance. If you thought the first one was difficult to follow through in about 4 or 5 minutes, then I might be one to watch back. But what we've done first off is just remove some of the reference bands and turned off the labels. Because what we're going to try and do is condense down the labelling into some nice tricks. So you'll notice there that Sam's created, again, an average 0 pill, and he's dropped that onto the bottom axes. That's a really nice way of just creating measure names by default. So a really nice trick to avoid a couple of steps. Now, the reason that we're going to do that is because we want to use the measure names to be able to provide the custom labeling. So Sam's just changing the size of some of the bars there, because what we're going to do is the bar is going to be the current sale and the line is going to be the prior year sale. What we want to be able to now do is just apply some different ways for the measure values and the current value and the current sales in terms of applying the labeling and doing some of that. So you'll see that Sam is now putting some of the labels on, but we are using a reference line. So we're not actually applying the labeling there to anything other than a reference line. We'll just I think we put the wrong one on. So we
I put it on the wrong ones.
It was meant to be me that messes up, not you. So it's making me feel better. So what we want to do now is just use a reference line to be able to do the labeling of the prior years. Now, why are we doing that? It's because of the fact we've got measure names. You can't label just one measure name, but if you use the reference line and then show it to the bottom of the reference line, then you can start to use that as your label. So you'll see here, actually that reference line that we've done is appearing to be able to label the Gantt part of the bar, but you couldn't do that simply by turning on the measure values in Tableau, because they're actually measure names and you can't say only do one of those, or at least you don't think you can, because just hold that thought, because we're going to show you something in a minute. So Sam has also hidden the subcategories, and we're now going to bring the subcategories into the detail. Now, why are we going to do that and also bring the current year sales into the detail? It's because we're going to start doing some of the labeling using some interesting techniques to get around some of the limitations that Tableau have got in terms of their default formatting and what it lets you to do. So what Sam is doing here is putting the subcategory and putting the current year sales into the labeling. But you'll see here, hang on a minute, we're labeling both the top of the bar and the Gantt line. Surely we don't want that. Well, no, absolutely we don't. So we're just going to take off some of the divider lines and some of the formatting. And then we are going to make the average 0 a white color, because we don't want that bar to show up. So we're just using the Gantt as a mechanism to label. We don't actually want it visible on the chart. So we've now just grounded all of the bars, and we are now going to choose a really nice, and this, I was blown away when I saw Sam do this. We are using measure names and we are labeling just the min and the max, and then we are going to untick the minimum. So what we've in theory done is, because you are labeling the measure names, it does it in alphabetical order. So consequently, by doing the max, it means you are labeling the top value. So what we've now done is we're not actually labeling traditionally using the pill. We are labeling using the reference line. We are labeling using the top measure name. And what we've now been able to do is order the subcategories by the current year sales. And you'll see we've removed the redundancy of the white space on the right-hand side by having the labels show up traditionally. By embedding it at the top of the bar, we can easily show what the bar is. We've used the Gantt bar underneath to be able to label the prior year sales. And what you'll see there, which is what I really like about this technique, is if you then resize the chart in terms of the left and the right, it automatically reduces the white space without overlapping the labels. So even if we take it down to the shortest amount, you're still not overlapping labels, because the only label overlapping is at the top and the bottom, and then the bar resizes. And again, we've just applied the dynamic labeling to reduce the complexity in terms of the numbers that we're seeing.
Okay. The last chart that we're going to make over is the scatter plot. You might look at this scatter plot, which is the show me version, and think that's perfectly acceptable, and you'd be right. The problem that we have here is we're comparing prior year sales to current year sales. So the position of the marks is really key here to your reading of that chart. The image at the moment is very square, but the problem is the axes are not aligned. The prior year axes only goes to 20,000 and the current year goes to 35,000. So if you were to look at this top mark here, you might be wrongly construing it that the prior year and the current year are equal values, but whereas actually they're not. The actual mark here is saying that the current year is above prior year, but by the way the dimensions are in the chart and the axis labeling, it's not very intuitive. You get a lot of cluster of data appearing in the bottom corner here, and there's nothing really from a label point of view or a color point of view helping the user read this chart. So here we go again.
So what Sam is going to start to do is start to create some dual axes. So you'll see that we've dropped prior year sales onto the same row as the current year, and then we're doing it again up to the top, so in the columns. Now, why are we doing that? It's so we can create a dual axes and we can synchronize the axes, so we can create all of the labeling around the chart. So all of a sudden, you've started to get the labeling to the left, to the right, the top, and the bottom. Now, Sam pointed out earlier that and it really does bug me on scatter plots when they aren't synchronized. So when you're two bars, if you're creating a square scatter plot, they really should be aligned in terms of the axes. So Sam's used a reference line technique there by dropping the prior year sales onto, or one of the sales onto the other measure, and then using that as a reference line, showing the max. And what that's done is automatically squared it. So even if your data changes, it will automatically square the chart because the reference line is used to expand or distract the bars, the axes. Now, we're also applying a trend line here because we want to almost create that equilibrium midpoint. So where the current year and the prior year sales are equal. So Sam's applied a trend line to the chart, which is shown there. But you'll see, because of the way we've done it, these grey circles are showing up, and that's because of the way we've put the trend line onto the detail. So there's a really nice technique, which, to be fair, I think was one that came from Ken and Kev. We've got to give a shout out. And if you choose a blank shape, so a blank PNG, you can then remove those shapes. So the trend line remains to be the divider line, but the redundant marks points that aren't being used aren't shown. We're just going to choose some design techniques here. So we've just made them solid circles on the points, and we've increased, slightly changed the opacity. And the reason we're doing that is because we believe when there's hollow circles, all you do is get the outline of the points, and it makes it very difficult when you get overlapping points. Now, if you do the solid circle and do the opacity, it just makes it slightly easier. Sam has also now just edited the axes. So you'll see that even though the right-hand axis is in theory prior year sales, we've edited the axes to say it's current sales, because what we want to say is the axis going up is current sales, the axis going along are prior sales. And then we get into some fun. So what we've done here is put some zero reference lines on. Now, why have we done that? Well, because part of the segments represent where current sales are greater than prior year sales, and the other segment represents when prior year sales is greater than current year sales. So if you put a 0 line on, we can start to use the label of that 0 line and be able to say what that segment relates to. So what we've got here is the 0 line on the left-hand side. We have put for a custom label, and we're going to show an increasing arrow and say this is increasing sales year on year. Now, at the minute, you get that top and bottom. But if we start to format that 0 line now, we can make the alignment of that just to the top. So consequently, we've almost said this top left-hand part is the increasing sales. But this is where I love it, that we start to use the colouring of that label to represent our legend. So we don't need a legend anymore because we are starting to colour the increasing sales by dark purple, the decreasing sales by light purple. So not only are we labelling the segments, we are also colouring it to make it a legend as well, so reducing the ink. And you'll also notice we did apply colour to the marked points to show the increasing, the decreasing, and just a call out to the static. We made it within about 5% of the equilibrium line, just because statistically that is neither increasing or decreasing, it's too small a difference. So we just wanted to say call out grey to be it's virtually the same. So we are now going to move on to the final dashboard.
That's you.
Yeah, no, so I was just catching up with my slide, that was all. Thank you. So the final dashboard is where we bring it all together. So this is more of an this is more of a kind of curated journey. We want to be able to understand how this year's sales performance compared to last year's and do it by region. So I just want to focus on the call out KPIs at the top. Traditionally, they would be a big number. So traditionally, they would be the East, and then there would be 147,213, 122, 250. But we've chosen to also include the bars in the call out numbers because it gives some important context. You now see immediately that the West is the highest performing region and the South is the lowest performing region. You, of course, could do that by reading the numbers, but that's a high amount of visual complexity to be able to read the numbers, assess it, and then work out which are the lowest. By putting the bars in, it creates the context, which makes it very easy for your end users to understand the context.
Okay, so the next section is the performance trend section. So this is essentially stepping down into the data a little bit further. So we've got two charts here for each of the regions. Again, we've got a bullet chart, which is telling us where a current year performance is compared to its prior year performance, which is the Gantt line. And then we've got spark lines telling us that detail of how those current year and prior year developed over the course of each of those years. Now, these add a good little bit of insight, because if you were to look at East, for example, East at the top, that Simon pointed out, is the second highest performing region in terms of sales. You would then step down and have a look to see how are they doing compared to last year. And it looks on the face of it like they're doing pretty well. They're above last year, which is where we're getting this little up indicator coming from. But if you were to then look at the spark line underneath, you'd actually get a little bit more of a story going on here. Because if you were to look at the first quarter or the first half of the year, the actual current year performance was below prior year. That would have caused a lot of concern if that was your company. You'd be worried, you'd be looking at your forecast to say, are we going to pull this back? You might have actually wanted to react to that and put on maybe some promotions to drive some sales. And that looks like what exactly has happened for the East. Their sales has absolutely boomed compared the latter half of the year, that dragged their overall performance to be above prior year.
I think Sam also just giving you a shout out to a couple of things there. We only label the beginning and the max, so the Jan and December on the month axis. I think it's a really neat way of just reducing the marks picks. But also you'll see that there are some light grey bars at the end of each region, but not at the end of West. And that's because we've just, rather than show the actual value, we've shown the West as the maximum to give the context of how far each region is away from the West's current year sales, and just a nice, again, context. So just to also call out white space and the flow. So you'll notice that each of the themes, so headlines, performance trends, and state components, are in sections going across. And they are divided very cleanly by a border and some white space. But also the fact that we've used gaps between each of the regions means that we haven't had to put grid lines or divider lines on to say this part of the section or this downward section relates to central, east, south, and west. The use of white space infers that all of these charts are the south, all of these charts are the west, without the need for complexity of additional breakouts. And that's a very deliberate design choice.
Okay, and the last part that I'm going to call out on this dashboard is actually this left-hand side here, which is what we're calling a helper pane. It's a dynamic pane that you can collapse, so you can give all of the dashboard real estate to the charts and the insight, and you can open it up and access your filters and your parameters, which is just a nice way of giving a little bit more control to your users. And in particular over here, we have the legend section. And I just want to call this out because what we're actually doing here is and this might cause a bit of alarm to some of the more experienced database people here, is we're actually using color for dual purpose here. So the reason that we're using color for dual purpose is we're trying to reduce the number of different colors and hues that we are placing on our dashboard to lighten the visual load on the user. So we've got a darker pink and a lighter pink. And what the mix of the color is, or what the dual purpose is essentially, think of it like this. If you're seeing a darker pink, then the emphasis is on the current year. If you're seeing a lighter pink, the emphasis is on the prior year. So how does that work in practice? Up here, we are looking at calling out just the current year performance. So it's in dark pink. On the Gantt bars, or the bullet chart, sorry, the current year is called out on the bar in that dark pink, and then the light pink is the Gantt bar, which is saying it's the prior year. The same on the spark lines. But where it changes is when you move down into the state components, where the bars are coloured depending on which year is higher in its sales. If current year is higher, then it has the current year preference of the darker pink. If the prior year is higher, then it has the lighter pink. The same is happening on these indicators. So we're using those two colors for a couple of different purposes. And because of that, we've had to create some custom legends to help us. Now, we're going to move on to another dashboard. So this is a very high level dashboard, delving just a little bit into the story of what's happening in the sales. The next dashboard that we're going to look at is more of an exploratory dashboard. So starting off, looking at that top 12 subcategories bar chart here on the left side. This looks very similar to the bullet chart that we were creating earlier with the labeling on the top of the bars. And what this is doing, again, it's using that color mix, and it's telling us that if you're looking at machines is the only one that's down on prior year. So there's an issue there. What we've done this time, though, is it is exactly the same chart as what we built earlier, the bullet chart, but we've put a bit of interactivity on there. If you were to hover on machines, then you would get that little Gantt line appear that we'd created before. That now gives the context of how far is it away from the prior year. You can hover on any mark and bring in and have a look to see how far are you above the prior year just by hovering. If you wanted to, you could override this and use a parameter to say, I want to see all of it. But the problem with showing all of it is it just increases that visual load. So what we're doing is we're allowing the user to explore the data in this bar chart to see where the issue is. And the issue at the moment is machines.
So what you'll see is you may notice the scatter plot to the right-hand side, the same scatter plot we did before. But when we designed it before, you should have also noticed there were a lot of points to the bottom left-hand corner because a lot of manufacturers don't have that much sales. So they don't exceed $10,000 worth of sales. So there is a way that you can change that. So what we've done is create a parameter that allows you to switch the axis scale. So the normal default is the normal axis, but you can change it to a log scale, and that will then expand out to a logarithmic scale. So all of a sudden, those points at the bottom, you can still start to distinguish, but we are now using a log scale. So consequently, you can see all the points. Now, why don't we default to that? Because in reality, most of your end users probably don't have the level of data fluency to grasp that by default. But for those users that do, who want to be able to see the distinct marks, we give them the option, but we default it to the majority of what most users can see. So if we just go back to the normal axes, we're going to click on the machines now, and we are going to be able to see on that scatter chart which are the manufacturers that have the impact on machines to be less sales this year than the current year. And you'll see there you've got 3 points, which Sam is now going to dive into.
Okay, so we're going to just dive into one of these points for time purposes, and we're going to select this point here, which is Okidata sales performance. So Okidata is one of our manufacturers, and if we were to select that, you can see exactly how far away from the prior year the current year sales are. So the current year sales is telling us that it's just below 4K, and prior year was actually above 12K. So essentially, the distance from this point to the trend line across is how far away the sales are in the current year to the prior year. But what we want to do is we want to understand that one step further. What products are driving this poor performance? Well, when I've clicked onto this mark, I'm actually filtering a chart that's not in the view. The eagle-eyed amongst you may have noticed that we've got some new icons down here in the helper pane. We've got 2 eyes next to a bullet chart and a scatter plot, but we don't have the eye next to a table. If I were to click on this eye icon, we bring in a hidden sheet, which is a table, and it's telling us the product names that relate to Okidata. Now, we cannot read those product names particularly well, so we don't need the bar chart anymore, the bullet chart, so we can close that down. It's served its purpose. We can now see the full product names that relate to that scatter plot mark. But we would also want to see a bit more detail about that. So let's close down the scatter plot. We don't need it anymore. It's served its purpose. Now we can see the full table in view. And we can start making some decisions about the products that we're seeing in this table. But we might want to give the full space. If you have a particularly wide table with lots of measures, you might want to give it the full dashboard real estate. And when doing so, and you've collapsed down those previous charts, we've actually kept the filters into the title here. So you don't need to have those other charts open to understand what you're looking at.
Sam, I noticed there you've also got something that I wouldn't expect to see in a normal Tableau table. You've got a couple of arrows to the left-hand side that are embedded in the table. Can you just give us a bit of intro about that?
Yeah, so those arrows are put there as a visual cue to say which products are above or up on their current year compared to the prior year. So where are they outperforming? So in our case, in our use case, we're looking at the underperforming products. So these are the products that we want to concentrate on, the ones that don't have the arrows. And we can clearly see from the table that we've got 4 product lines here with no current year sales, but yet they had very high prior year sales. So that is our issue. So that ends the dashboard showcase. And we're going to just quickly move on to some inspiration while we've just got a couple of minutes. So we just want to call out a couple of people from the community that you might want to take a look at that show really good examples of business dashboard design. The first person I want to call out is Chimji Nwosu. He is no longer new to the community, and he's very well established, and he's well known for just producing really good, clean data viz. Take a look at his profile. He does a lot of really good business dashboards on top of just generally good design work.
And I will give a shout out to Ellen Blackburn, who is a consultant at the Information Lab. I had the pleasure of working with Ellen a couple of years ago. Ellen uses colour, white space and font really well and deliberately to create a really clean, positive experience for your end user. Her Tableau public profile is full of either business examples using the packaged data sources with Tableau or from community challenges. And a lot of her designs can easily be applied in your business dashboards to really make them a lot more intuitive.
And then the next person we're going to call out is Ludovic. Ludovic, like Simon and I, is an ex-Iron Viz finalist. And what we particularly like about Ludovic is he produces really clean designs, but he also thinks around these chart types. He thinks around the problem in the way that we've sort of shown you before, just doing slightly different tweaks to the way that the chart is made up or formatted. And he is really creative around those chart types. So we especially like what Ludovic does here.
And just to finish, we just wanted to call out a community project that you can all participate in to enhance your skills when it comes to business dashboard designs. Mark Bradbourne, who's a fellow Baldy, works for Tableau now, but he created the Real World Fake Data Initiative. So what Mark and his team do is share with you specific anonymized business data sets and give you a challenge. Create a call center dashboard, create a supply chain dashboard, and he provides the data sets to allow you to try out design choices. Now, where this really comes into its own is if you go on to Tableau Public and search for RWFD, or Real World Fake Data, you will get a whole host of dashboards created across the community that can really give you inspiration, and that growth in terms of different perspectives. They don't all look the same for a reason, and they all give you different design choices that you can apply in your own work. So that is the end of our talk. Sam and I just want to say a massive thank you for listening to us today and allowing us to walk you through our perception of beautiful business dashboards. Both of our Twitter handles are there that you can follow along with our blog posts, but just also to share that we have placed this workbook on both of our Tableau public pages so that you can download it, and we've actually annotated some of the work as well, so you can get some of the thinking behind it and understand how to build it. So if you do want to access this and rebuild it for yourself, in addition to the recording, please do download it from our Tableau public profile and be able to reverse engineer it. But massive thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Sam and Simon, you have a ton of questions in the Q&A if you have time to. I thought about answering some, but I figure I'll let you do it.
I was going to say the same thing. Maybe a couple of quick questions that might help a few people. There's a lot about, what might be available in terms of, do you guys have these things up on Tableau Public? Are there data sets that can be used to follow along with some of those things? I guess, can you talk about what resources might be available to do some of the things that you talked about?
Yeah, so just quickly before I will be honest, Sam was a lot of the brains behind some of those technical builds. So I would just say all of what we built was using Superstore. So it means that you can reverse engineer what we've done. But Sam, do you want to give some kind of where you got some of the inspiration ideas from?
Throw me in at the deep end. That's a difficult question to answer. So I suppose the biggest part of where I get my inspiration is from joining the community in Twitter and following the people that we're highlighting at the end of the inspiration, Kevin and Ken, Annabelle, everybody who's involved with Tableau and in the community all produce fantastic stuff. You'll just get little nuggets of what they're doing, download their workbooks, reverse engineer it, and you just end up building a sort of a mental repository of things that that you've seen and you can do and you can replicate, like the blank shapes that I think Kevin blogged about a while ago. Picking up things like that, or transparent colors. If you get involved in the community, you'll get all of this sort of inspiration sort of hitting you between the eyes, and you just absorb it.
Awesome. And then one other, I would echo all those things. I would also add, I appreciate you already bringing up real world fake data. I think things like that are really awesome for starting to figure out what works better for you, what new ideas you can come up with. So would definitely encourage people to look into those things. One more before we go to our next group, but would love your thoughts on introducing interactivity. I would assume most people building dashboards are familiar with static charts. Obviously, our end users are usually more familiar with static charts than interactive charts. Can you kind of talk about your approach to that, how you make sure that your end users can understand what's going on when you start to make more complex charts or interactive charts?
So my initial reaction on that would be ensure you're labeling where interactivity is available, what you're expecting them to do with it. Try not to make it too complex so that a user won't end up going down a little rabbit hole of interaction. So what I mean by that is you might want to drill down to a level down in your data, but then you don't want them to then start drilling down again and again, because then how do they then start stepping back? Unless you can really make it obvious with the annotations around what you're expecting them to do. Sometimes though, you'll find that you run out of space on the dashboard to put all of that information. Sometimes we've seen for JLL, they give visual cues next to charts as to when they have built interactivity. There'll be like a little symbol next to the chart to just sort of that really quick sort of, okay, I can see that symbol is there, I can click on this. It's a difficult one, but I would say with the interactivity element, you've got to also think about what is the end what is the end target for your dashboard. Are you expecting your users to end up screenshotting or PDFing some of this analysis? If that's the case, then as soon as you start adding interactivity, you lose some of the context around where they came from with their analysis. So interactivity is great, but don't make it too complicated.
Sam, just to add, I'd say the risk if you don't do interactivity is that your dashboard will end up being a mile long. So interactivity can really help you condense down what people are seeing. But just to emphasize what Sam said, that's something we do at JLL every single day. Have a consistent visual prompt to say when you've got a click action, a filter action, or a click through action, because you need to make it intuitive. But one of the best parts of interactivity is that you can condense down your design to make it accessible, because otherwise you'll end up building a dashboard that tries to answer every question for everyone and ends up answering nothing.
Well said. I'm gonna hold it there rather than asking other questions. I will note though, and Kevin already mentioned, there are roughly 30 not hyperbole questions in the Q&A. So if you guys have a second to kind of run through those, I'm sure there are elements that I did not get to in the past couple of questions. So it would be great for you guys to check some of those out.
There is a question that is very good, Sedale. Just here, someone asked it, which kind of dad joke is loading, Sam?
No, I'm out. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that on a recording.
Don't want the evidence.
So after the recording, you can say it.
Yeah. See us after the event. Cool. Want to thank you so much, Sam and Simon. Really great presentation. I think about 10 minutes ago, there was a lot of mind-blown emojis, lots of raucous applause. So really appreciate you guys spending the time. And now we are going to the Flerlage twins to talk about how to do cool stuff in Tableau. I doubt they need much introduction, but very quickly, if for some reason someone's new to the community or somehow didn't encounter the twins, Kevin is a public ambassador, 3-time Tableau visionary, and currently a manager of business intelligence at Unifund. He's been in the data world for 15 years and one of the most favorited authors on Public. Regularly contributes to the FlerlageTwins.com, which is both of the twins' website. I would highly recommend you check that out. It has an unlimited amount of information for different things that you can do in Tableau, in addition to what both we'll talk about today. And then we've got his twin brother, Ken. Also an ambassador from forums this time, 5 times Tableau Visionary. I'm not sure if they are competing or not, but assistant director of data analytics at Bucknell. Ken's an IT specialist and has been a part of the Tableau community since 2016. Very active member, definitely helpful in the forums, which is another great resource that we can talk about in a whole other talk. But I will leave it there. I'm sure they have some introductory slides as well, and let the twins talk how to do cool stuff in Tableau.
Dale, let me set my screen. See my screen and hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, so we're going to be talking about how to do cool stuff in Tableau. This is from TC22. This is only the second time we presented this presentation since the Tableau conference. So hopefully you'll learn something new. Just some introductions. This is myself, Kevin, and on the right, Ken. Together, as Sedale mentioned, we run the website flerlagetwins.com. We talk about lots of Tableau stuff and some other data related stuff, but mostly Tableau. And we are both Tableau visionaries. Again, as Sedale mentioned, this is a term that's formerly known as Zen Masters. Ken's a 5-time Tableau visionary, and I'm a 3-time Tableau visionary. Ken started using Tableau about 1.5 years before me, so he helped me a lot. So I say this is a live audience. This isn't a live audience. I mean, you guys are live and all, but we were really excited at Tableau conference because it was the first time we presented to a actual live audience since TC19. This is a little selfie right in the middle of TC19 that was in, I think, October 2019. So it was 2.5 years or something before we got to present in front of a live audience. Now, if you were at our TC19 presentation, you might recall Ken telling the audience that we weren't competitive. And as Ken said, we weren't competitive. I showed this on screen. This is what I call the ultimate favorites competition. This is looking at favorites on Tableau Public. And at that time, again, October 2019, Ken was the 2nd most favorited author on Tableau Public. I was the 4th. I was catching him. He had about 2,500 favorites on Tableau Public. But since then, a lot of things have changed. Obviously, this happened. And for so many of us, including Ken and I, that led to this. Luckily, Ken and I were able to lose that weight. But one major thing happened since then is the data. The data changed significantly since 2019. In fact, I was able to flip the script on good old Ken. So I'm now the 2nd most favorite author on Tableau Public, and Ken's the 3rd. Somewhere around 10,000 favorites. His numbers are slightly off, but slightly outdated. So, but I really say this for one general purpose is if anybody is to wonder who's the best at this Tableau stuff, well, I think it's pretty obvious, right?
Whoa, Kev. I think we all know who is the best at this Tableau stuff.
And you got me. Andy Kriebel. Andy Kriebel is the best. To prove that, we can look at Josh Tapley's Cerebro, and we can see number of favorites by author. Andy Kriebel smoking both of us, and we'll probably do that forever. He has about 16,000 favorites. And if you weren't aware, Andy's visual vocabulary is the most favorited viz on all of Tableau Public. This is actually slightly outdated. It has over 4,000 favorites and well over 3 million views. Pretty incredible stuff, Andy. So I apologize. Andy is clearly the best. All right. What we're going to talk about today is how to do cool stuff in Tableau. We're going to talk about some tips, some tricks, some techniques. I'm going to do 2 sections. Ken's going to do 2 sections, and hopefully some folks learn a few things. We are going to move fast, but like Annabelle said earlier, don't worry about taking notes. It's recorded. You can also get to all the different links to all our different stuff here on flerlagetwins.com/cool stuff. Our workbooks will be there up on Tableau Public, as well as a bunch of related blog posts, some from us, some from others. And speaking to others, before we continue, we just want to say thanks to an awesome community. You're going to see tips from all these different people mingled in within this presentation. So thanks to all these people, and thanks to all this great inspiration from our greater Tableau community. With that, I say we get started, and I'm gonna go ahead and hand it over to Ken, and Ken can get us started with his 2 sections.
All right, thanks, Kev. So I'm going to start off with some cool stuff you can do with histograms. That sounds kind of boring, but hopefully you'll think some of this stuff is interesting and cool as we go along. So we're going to try to build this histogram chart here. Get that out of my way here. So this is a histogram that's basically binned by customer sales. So we're going to take each customer, we're going to total their sales, we're going to bin those, and then plot those on a histogram. So key points is that each of these bars is a count of unique customers within each of those bins based on their total sales. We're going to have a little dashed line here, reference line for the median of those total customer sales. And then we're going to color these based on whether or not they're below the median, at the median, or above the median. So if you were starting to build this, how might you attack this problem? Well, you might first start off with a typical bins calculate field. So I've already created a bins field on sales. I'm using a parameter. You can see the parameter over here with a configurable size in the bin size. I like to do that because it allows the user, in some situations, I can give that to the user and allow them to fiddle with the bin size to get it to see exactly what they want to see. So we've got this bins. We'll drag this out to columns, and then we'll do a count distinct of customer name. And now we have a histogram. But it's pretty clear from here that the distribution is a little bit different. This is not quite the histogram we were looking for. And the problem is that this is looking at each row in our data set, and then looking at the sales in each of those rows and then counting the customer IDs. That's not exactly what we want. As I said before, we want to look at each customer, the total sales, sum those up, and then bin them, and then do the histogram. So how would we change this to get that total customer sales instead? Well, we might start by creating a calculated field, sum of sales, and then try to create bins on that, right? So I've got this sum of sales calculated field. I'll right click and try to create bins, and I don't have a create bins option. And the reason for that is because this is an aggregate. You can't create bins on an aggregate field. So that's where I like to introduce one of my favorite level of detail calculation tricks. So level of detail calculation will actually return a non-aggregate field. So if we fix on the customer ID and then sum up the sales, this will produce the sum of sales at our customer, but because it produces a non-aggregate, we can actually create bins on it, unlike that aggregate field. So I've already done this. I've created my bins field on that LOD here, again, using our parameter for bin size. So let's drag this over. And now we see a distribution that looks much more like what we were hoping to see before. So the next thing I would want to do is that reference line. Remember, we put a reference line on the median value. So I've created a calculated field for the median value. I'm just doing an LOD in this case and grabbing the median of the sum of sales. We'll drag this over to detail so that it's available to us for that reference line. Then we'll right click on the axis to add the reference line. And you'll see here, I don't know if it's falling off my screen here, but you'll see there's no option for adding a reference line. So this is a limitation of built-in Tableau bins. You can't do things like create reference lines, and there are a handful of other limitations like that. So we're kind of stuck. Creating that reference line is a little bit difficult here. But there is an option. And so here we can introduce this technique. So this is something I learned from Jonathan Drummy, and it was actually a unique or a tip that was created by Joe Mako. This is basically just a simple calculated field. We plug in our measure, our bin size, and it creates basically a bins field. But because this is not using Tableau's built-in bins, it's using a calculated field, we don't have those same limitations. So we can drag this over top of on our columns, change this to bar, and now we can right-click add the reference line, select our median value, let's change it to dashed line, turn off all these things. And now we have our median reference line. So that technique, that bring your own technique, bins technique, is something I use all the time. And in fact, I just start with it now. I just bypass the normal bins and go straight to this so that I don't run into any of those limitations. One thing you will notice here, though, is the bar sizes are a little weird. I like my histogram bars to be right next to each other, nice and compact. To try to get these compact, well, we can try to increase the size, right? And that doesn't quite get there. The other problem with this is that if I change the size of the chart, we start to get this sort of overlapping effect, and they go on top of each other. So that's not a great use of that, the size there. So to correct this problem, what we can do is drop our bin size on the size field, change, and then click size and change this to fixed. And now it will always be the width of our bin size. It doesn't matter what size the chart is, it automatically adjusts. All right, so we're getting close here. The next thing we're going to do is deal with this color. So I've created a calculated field called color that basically just compares each bin to the median to the median value. It returns either median, lower, or higher. We'll simply drag that over to color, and now we have separate colors for each of those different levels. Now, I don't love these colors in this case. I think they're a little too bright. That orange doesn't tell me a whole lot. I like to choose some colors that have a little bit of meaning. So I'm going to click on color and edit my colors and choose a different palette. So as I start to scroll down here, you're going to see a lot more palettes than is typical in Tableau. And so this is, I'll just take a moment to give a plug to Datafam Colors, which is a project I worked on with Rodrigo Coloni. It's basically a crowdsourcing tool for Tableau color palettes. You can go in and create and enter in your favorite color palettes, and then it will be made available to the community. You can then just go download your preferences file, and you'll have all access to all these color palettes. I think there are 100 and a lot of them. There are a lot of color palettes of all the different varieties of color palettes. So one I really like is this Exotic and High Impact by Neil Richards. For the higher, I'm going to choose this bluish color. Lowish, we'll have a red, and then this sort of gray for the median. And now we have this nice color, which I think feels a little bit more meaningful than the colors that were there before. So I'm going to just sort of skip past the cleanup of some of these things, clean up the tooltips and clean up the axes and things like that. When you hover, we can now see the total number of customers in that bin as well as the bin. So at the bottom is the bin. One thing I don't like about this is when you show the bin as a tooltip, in the tooltip, you just get the sort of bottom value of that bin. I would really like for this to read 0 to 499 and 500 to 999. From an end user perspective, they really struggle with understanding that if you don't show that sort of whole range of that bin. So there are a couple of different ways that we can address that problem. One pretty simple way is to create a calculated field like this. It basically just has the low end of the bin and the high end of the bin. Then we drag that onto our tooltip, and now we have that range, right? I'm pretty anal when it comes to formatting, and particularly when we get into big thousands numbers. I really like those thousands separators. So it'd be nice to add thousands separators to this. The most straightforward and probably the best way to do that would be to drop a pill on tooltip for the low value, one on the tooltip for the high value, format them with comma or thousand separators, and then bring them together in the tooltip. But I like to use this opportunity to show this nifty little regex technique. This regex function will basically insert comma separators into a numeric field. So pretty cool little technique that I think can be useful in a number of different scenarios. So this is just going from the low value to the high value and formatting them with commas. So let's drag that on here. And now we have the nice commas separating the thousands. We're almost there. Yeah, I guess kind of the last thing I like to do is add a little color in the tooltip. Not really all that necessary because the colors are already there in the bar, but there are times where this is a really valuable technique. I don't have time to show you how to do that here, but I just will plug our 2021 Tableau conference presentation. We show you all the steps you need to do that kind of thing within your tooltip. So check that out. It's called Make It Better. And we'll show you exactly how to do that. So in the end, we've started, from a very simple, simple techniques, and we're able to pretty quickly create this nice histogram that's binned by total customer sales. And I think, a lot of the techniques that we've shown here are useful in other areas other than just histograms. All right, so I'm gonna jump over to an entirely different topic, and that is set control. We're gonna do some cool stuff with set control. So if we were in a room together, I would ask for a show of hands of how many people have used set control or use it regularly. And then, based on that, I might ask how many people have used sets as well. And usually what we see is that, a decent amount of people have used sets, fewer people have used set control or use it regularly. And I personally think it's an underutilized and yet incredibly powerful feature within Tableau. So I want to show you, the basics of how it works, and then a couple of use cases. And I think hopefully from there, you can start to see where you can apply it in your own work. So Philippos Limperopoulos is a former director of product management at Tableau Software, and his team led set control. He describes sets as named filters that can be used in calculations. And, that's kind of a confusing description there. But as I start to show you sets and set control, hopefully you can start to see what this really means. Sets themselves have been around for a very long time, as long as I can remember, since before I started using Tableau. So they're nothing new, but they've always been somewhat static. You as a developer, as a creator of a workbook, had to use those sets, and your users really couldn't interact with them. They couldn't change what's in the set, what's out of the set. And that made them, a little less functional than ideal. Then came set actions, right? So set actions allowed us to create sort of these user interface components to add or remove values from a set. And that made sets a lot more powerful, but we still had to create these sort of artificial UI components in order to allow our users to interact with those sets. And what set control does is it just creates, just makes available a box that looks like a filter, right? Looks and acts just like a filter, and it allows you can expose it to your users, and it allows them to specify what's in the set, what's out of the set, and it's very easy to use. And because of that, I think sets are way more powerful now than they ever were in the past. So again, I'm going to show you some basic usage of sets and set control. And then I'll show you some more advanced usage, and hopefully you can see how to apply those in your own work. So the most basic usage of sets and set control are for basic filtering. So here's an example where we're showing sales by month of our different categories. And we have the option to filter down on a specific category. So obviously, if I uncheck one of these, we're only going to see those selected categories. So we can use sets to do something very similar. So we can start with a chart like this with no filter, and we'll right-click the category and create a set. And we choose which options we want, which of the categories we want to be in the set as a default position. So I've actually already created this set here, and I've chosen furniture and technology to be part of that set. So I'm just going to right-click and drag this over to filters, and then I'll choose the in-out option, and I'm just going to show those that are in the set, right? So obviously, we're only showing those that are in the set. We're only showing furniture and technology. Now we'll right-click on this and choose Show Set. Now this is going to show the set control. You see the set control over here. Again, as I said before, it looks just like a filter. It works just like a filter. It has all the same options as a filter. And I can now sort of click and select, and it's going to show me just the items that are in the set. So this works pretty much exactly like the filter. And you probably would never do this because it doesn't really make sense if you can do basic filtering, right? But you'll see in a moment where we can apply the same technique to things where filter wouldn't work. We can also do this filtering with a calculated field. So remember, Filippo said that sets are named filters that can be used in a calculated field. So we can put these in a calculated field like this. So a set within a calculated field is going to return true or false. Basically true if the category, in this case, the category is in the set, false if it's not. I'm just saying if it's in the set, then return keep, otherwise hide. Now, I don't really need this whole if-then logic here. I could just put the set in the calculated field and it will return true or false. I like to build out the whole if-then logic because I think it's a little bit easier for people, particularly new users, to understand that, other than the sort of Boolean stuff that is a little bit confusing at first. So we can drag this over to filters. We'll just choose the keep option, right? Now we want to show the set control. Well, I can't right click on this. This is a calculated field. That won't give me the show set option. So we'll just drag the set down to detail, then right click that pill, show the set. And then as we remove or include items in that list, you can see we get just the items that are in the set. So that's the most basic functionality of sets in set control. Now let me show you something a little bit more advanced to that that you can apply in your work. And that is sort of this in-out analysis. So this chart is showing, has allowed me to choose what I want to keep in the set and what I want to show out of the set. What's in the set is going to show in red. What's out of the set is going to show in blue, right? So we can build this. We'll start off by showing our monthly sales. And then we're just going to drag the set over to color. And then you can see we get our red for in, our blue for out. We'll right click this, do show set. And now we have the ability to control what's in the set or what's out of the set. A quick plug for Steve Wexler. He has a great blog on his website of doing this kind of in-out analysis for survey data. Really powerful if you want to compare one group of constituents to sort of everyone else. And especially if you give your end user the ability to select which groups you're comparing. So one problem I have with this is that it's a little kind of difficult to read. You know, I know my red is in, but then I have to look at the set control to see which values are actually in or out of it. And that's why I like to use sort of a title here. So a little title here that actually shows which values are in and which values are out. The problem is in this example, I've just used a text box and these are static values. If my user chooses to change the makeup of that set, it's not updating automatically. So I just want to do a quick sort of detour here and show you how we can create a dynamic title that has these sort of comma separated values. So this is another trick technique I learned from Jonathan Drummey. I can't go through it in detail because it's kind of complicated, but it's really just a couple of calculated fields. I've started by creating a couple of calculated fields that have, you know, whether it's in or out of the set, or sorry, I've thrown the set on here so you can see the values that are in, which are out, drop the categories on there. And then I'm basically just using these calculated fields. Again, you can just sort of copy them from Jonathan's workbook. Complicated stuff with previous values and lookups. And then, you know, sort of bringing those together with additional previous values and lookups. And I don't entirely understand what all this is doing, but the end result is we get a comma separated list like I've displayed here. So I've created one comma separated list for those that are in, you can see furniture and technology, and then another for those that are out. We only have one, so there's no commas, but we get those nice items there. And then we can drop each of these on our text card, edit the text, add a little bit of color to those to match our colors of the in and out that we've used. And then what we want to do is sort of isolate one of these so that we can use it for our title. So to do that, we can use this cool little calculated field last. Last just basically counts the records from the last one in the partition. So in this case, the last one is this final value here. So if last is 0, it's going to be this last one would be here, last equal 2 would be here. What we're doing is saying last equals 0. So this is going to be true only on this last row. So I'm going to drag that to filters, choose true, and it's going to condense this down to that one row. I can now hide the headers on each of these blue pills. And now we've sort of isolated just this text, just our title text. And then we can use that as a dynamic sort of title at the top. Now, as I choose different makeup of these sets, we can see it automatically adjusts to account to that. And we have this really nice, easy to use, easy to understand in-out analysis. And I will say that that comma separated thing, it might seem like a niche sort of use case, but I use it all the time. It's really, really powerful if you want to take a bunch of information and sort of condense it into sort of a comma separated list. All right, so I have one more set control example, and that is with hex maps. So I love hex maps. I think they're a great way to show certain types of geographic data. So here we have a hex map showing profit by state. I think it looks pretty great. But it would be nice to be able to filter down to specific years. So I've added a filter on year. And notice what happens, watch closely if I filter down to just 2019. So we have, all of a sudden, we have these big gaps. You can see North Dakota and what is that, West Virginia, and then DC sort of sits out here and it's totally gone. And you kind of don't even realize it's gone because it's sort of floating out there, right? I don't like that. I would like for those marks to stay there so I can still see that there's a state in that position, but have some sort of indicator that, there were actually no sales. So obviously there were no profits, right? Well, we can actually use set control to do that. So we're going to take this filter off of here. Just go back to all of our data. We're going to create a calculated field on year. You see year of order date. Then we create a set on that year. So you can see I've already created that set. I'm going to choose all of the years for now. And we're going to drag that set up to filters and then choose in and out. Now I'm going to choose use all because I actually don't want to filter any data here. This is really me just using this as a shortcut to get to the show set option so that I can provide the set control to people. If I choose to remove any of these, it's not doing anything because that filter is showing both in and out of the set. So this isn't really doing anything at this point in time. But next, what we want to do is create a sort of new measure that will account for that set. So we've created this calculated field, profit for measure, basically says if the year is in the set, then give me the profit, otherwise give me 0. So we can use this instead of a filter to show either that profit or for those years that aren't in the set, a 0. So I'm going to drag this over top of my color. And let me just pause here a minute. I'm guaranteeing that everyone has had this problem before where you switch to a measure and then all of a sudden your formatting, your colors, they all change back to the default. Well, there's a nice simple little technique for avoiding that. If you just double click your measure and edit it inline, start typing your measure, select that, it will maintain all those colors exactly and all the other formatting that you've used there. So now we have profit selected on color. You can see if we go to DC, we see 0 profits, North Dakota, 0 profits, Wyoming, 0 profits. So this is, I think, is a much better way to show this data because it doesn't drop those hexagons totally from the map. But part of me still feels a little uneasy about it because I think, to me, 0 sales is a little bit different than sales yet 0 profits. We have these ones like Montana that have very low profits, but they at least had some sales, right? Whereas North Dakota had no sales at all. And that might be something you want to sort of visually show your end users. So to deal with that, what we can do is drag this set over to shape. Click the shape. We've got this sort of closed hexagon in those. And I've created just this sort of hashed hexagon. We'll choose that for the out. And now each of those states that had no sales at all get this sort of hash mark hexagon. They're still there. We can still see, but they're visually different. And I can clearly tell that there's something going on in those states where there's no sales at all. Again, which I think is quite different than having some sales but low profits. So with that, kind of finished with my section. Again, I've only sort of scratched the surface of things you can do with set control, but these kinds of examples where you're filling in gaps, but you don't want to filter, where you want to do that sort of in-out analysis, hopefully you can start to see in your day-to-day jobs where you can apply these techniques and really get some good value out of what is, I think, a very underutilized feature in Tableau. With that, I'm going to hand it back over to Kev.
All right, thanks, Ken. Cool stuff. Get it? Sorry. All right, you see my screen? I'll assume that
Yes.
nobody answering means
Yep.
that yes. All right, so I'm going to be talking about cool stuff with table calculations. Again, like Ken asked before, if we were in a live audience, I'd ask everybody to raise their hands. Who's comfortable with fixed LODs? Who's really comfortable with them? And, usually we get maybe 60% of the audience raise their hand, maybe 50% of the audience raise their hand, say they're really comfortable with them. And then I asked a similar question, how many people are very comfortable with table calcs? And usually we get about 10% of the audience raise their hand. So the nice thing about fixed LODs and table calcs is basically, if you can build it with a fixed LOD, you can also build it with a table calculation. All right, some wise man said that once, I think. But why? Why, if I can build it with a fixed LOD, why might I want to build it with a table calc instead? Well, the main reason is the order of operations. Fixed LODs and table calcs occur at different places in the order of operations, and sometimes you need it to be at the bottom versus at the top. I'm not going to go too much into detail with that, but that is one major advantage. Another major advantage is we can use a table calc to do what 3, 4, 5 fixed LODs might do. So we might use one table calc to replace several different fixed LODs. We'll touch on that a little bit, but what we really want to do is just talk about how we can take a fixed LOD, and if you're familiar and uncomfortable with fixed LODs, and we can kind of modify that into a table calculation. So here's our use case. We've got 3 old iPhone products and we have sales by month. And what we really want to figure out is what was the last month in which these were sold. We can hover over this, or we can just look at the chart pretty easily and see the Apple iPhone 5, the last time it was sold was in September 2020, this one November 2020, and this one October 2019. But we want a calculation to figure out when each of these iPhones was last sold. So we might write a fixed LOD to do this that looks like this. It's just fixed on the product name. So this is product name. Each one of these lines and each one of these colors represents product name. So fixed on product name, give me the max of the month order date. So I've got all this date trunk stuff. Basically what I'm just saying is give me the month and then give me the max month, right? So fixed on product name, give me the max month. Now, if we were to write a table calculation to do that, it might look like this. That same date trunk stuff, but window max of it. So window max of the month, right? Okay. So how are these similar? Well, I mentioned it just a second ago. We have this whole date trunk month of order date. These are identical in both calculations. We have a max in the fixed LOD, it's just max, and the table calc, it's just window max. But where's this piece? Where's this fixed on product name part in our table calculation? Well, it's not there, right? So how do we do it? It's in the edit table calculation window. So how this works is whatever, if we want to take a fixed LOD and convert it to a table calculation, whatever we're fixing on in the fixed LOD will be unchecked in the edit table calculation window. So fixed on product name, we go to specific dimensions, we uncheck product name in our table calculation window. Fixed on product name, unchecked in the table calculation window. Whatever we're fixing on will be unchecked, okay? So let's put this into practice. I've created a couple calculations here. The first one is this fixed LOD. Just like I showed before, fixed on product name, give me the max month, right? I've got this on detail. If I drag it onto label, you'll see September 2020, November 2020, and October 2019, just like I showed before. So really easily done using a fixed LOD. Now let's take that and let's convert that fixed LOD over a table calculation. Just like we showed before, we're going to set it up with this calculation. And then we're going to uncheck product name so that it's essentially fixed on product name. So let's do that. I created this second calculation. This is that table calculation, fixed, window max of the order date, essentially, right? Again, there's no fixed on product name anywhere. We can do that by right-clicking this and clicking Edit Table Calculation. It defaults to table across. What's table across? I don't really ever get table across and down and up, then down. It's confusing. So I typically am going to set this to specific dimensions. It's already defaulted to unchecking product name. Remember, when we want it fixed on product name, we're going to uncheck that in the table calculation window. It's already done. So this should be good to go. Now, if I drag this onto label, same thing we had with the fixed LD, September 2020, November 2020, and October 2019. So let's kind of drive this home a little bit. What if instead of getting the last date that all these three products were sold, what if we wanted the last date that any of them were sold? So for all three of these products, what was the last date that any three of these products were sold? We can see visually that the last time was November 2020, but we want a calculation to do that. So let's go back to what I've repeated 100 times just to be very clear. And remember what we said, if we fixed on product name, we would uncheck that in this table calculation window. Whatever we're fixing on is unchecked. Well, if we were going to write a fixed LD to calculate what the last sales date is for any of the products, we basically have this fixed on nothing. It would just be fixed colon. We wouldn't fix on any dimension. And if we fix on nothing in the table calculation window, we will uncheck nothing. So let's give that a try. I've got this, I've got this fixed LD here. I'll take a step back. I created this fixed LD, fixed on nothing. Give me the max of the order date. I got it here. If I drag it out the label, we'll see it's November 2020 for everything. This is the last date, and that calculation gives the last sales date for all of the products. Now let's do it with that same table calculation we used before. I haven't changed this table calculation. I'm not fixing it on something, or I'm not using two calculations like I did with the fixed LDs. I'm using the same calculation. We're just going to change how it computes. We're going to just say edit the table calculation. Remember, I said if it's fixed on nothing, we'll uncheck nothing. That means everything's checked. When I hit OK, you'll see we now have November 2020 for everything. So really easy to kind of understand how, if we understand what the fixed LOD version is, we can translate that over to a table calculation just by understanding this edit table calculation window. So let's do one other use case here. What I'm looking at is sales by week, right? And these are all the different order IDs within a category. So this is sort of order ID / category, and we've got it per week, and I'm just showing 5 weeks. And then I've just sort of jittered these just to give them some space. So what I want to understand is, what is the mark with the highest sales? If we're looking at this table or at this chart, we can tell really quickly this one, this order ID under technology has 2880 in sales. That is the highest sales for any of these different marks. This one's 2480, this one's 1890. Really simple to understand. But what if we wanted to do that with a calculation? Well, we would probably just create a window max. This is really simple. Window max sum of sales. So sum of sales is our vertical axis here, our y-axis. Window max sum of sales. So let's see if it works. Let's drop that on label. And we see 2880. This, you see in the tooltip, this shows 2880, and our label shows 2880. So looks like it worked. Wait a minute. This says 2480, and this says 2480. And this is 1890 and 1890. What I really wanted to show is the max sum of sales. And what it seems to be doing is just giving me the sum of sales at the level of detail on my screen, giving me, 2480. It's basically labeling these marks with the sum of sales. So why is it doing that? Well, let's edit that table calculation to find out. Again, table cross, I don't know. So let's just hit specific dimensions and see what it's doing. We can read this like a fixed LD. It's not a fixed LD, it's table calculation, but we can read it like a fixed LD. And how we read it would say is fixed on category and order ID, give me the sum of sales, the max sum of sales, right? So what it's essentially doing is giving me the sum of sales at the category and order ID level. In this case, I want to know for everything, what's the max sum of sales. So we're essentially saying fixed on nothing, then we want to give the maximum sales. So if we're fixed on nothing, we will uncheck nothing. So I'm going to check these boxes and we'll see we now show 2880. That's the highest sales value. And we've got that on our label for every single mark. Now let's assume that we wanted to look at something a little different. We want to say for every category, give me the max sum of sales. So here is for the whole thing, give me the max sum of sales. What if we want to know that for every category? Well, if we were writing a fixed LD to do it, we would say fixed on category, right? So let's just edit our table calculation. If it's fixed on category, that whatever we're fixing on is unchecked in our table calculation window. So we're going to fix on category. Let's uncheck this. And we now see 2880 for all the orange marks, 1890 for all the pink marks. Again, it's colored by category, 1670 for all the blues. So, all right, that might be a little heavy. Again, you can go to the Flerlage Twins /cool stuff, and you can check out links on where I've talked about how these easy ways to move from a fixed LD to a table calculation. Next thing I'm going to talk about is cool stuff that's invisible, cool things that are invisible. Now I'm going to scold Sam and Simon for stealing my thunder a little bit. They used transparent shape earlier. They mentioned transparent color. We'll maybe talk about some of that. If you've seen any of my presentations in the past couple of years, you've heard me talk about transparent shapes. Let me just show you what that is, and then we'll get into some use cases on top of what Sam and Simon already showed. So if you were to go into PowerPoint and just draw out a square, then you can go up to shape fill and you could set it to have no fill. Then you can go to shape outline and set it to have no outline. And then what happens is this shape essentially is gone. It disappeared. But the shape is still there. If you click on the outer edge of that shape, you can actually right click that and save it as a picture. Okay, what it essentially is a transparent shape. Now there are lots of cool use cases. I've written about a dozen of them or so on our website. You just search on flerlagetwins.com for transparent shapes. But I'll tell you, there's probably hundreds of use cases. I use them in almost every single dashboard. I just used it about 30 times in the work dashboard I'm working on right now. What are some of them? I'll go pretty quickly through this. This is a chart that we create a lot at work. This is really just looking at a model that we created, and this is the random values. If I were to select 20% of my accounts, I'd expect 20% of my profit, but our model allows me to get, say, 37% of my profit on just 20% of accounts. That's kind of unimportant, but this is just a line chart in a dual axis with a circle mark. So line in a circle. What I essentially want to do is build this. We want to isolate one percentage so we can focus on that percentage, not all of them. So how might I do that? Well, I might create a calculation in Tableau that says, we're looking at isolating the 30% mark. So I might say if the percentage of the accounts equals 0.3, then give me the sum of profit, else null. And then I'll take this and I'll drag that to be my secondary axis. And then I'll change the mark type. And at this point, I'm already done. I don't want to do all that. In fact, I don't need to write a calculation at all to build that chart. All I have to do, I jumped the gun. All I have to do is go to the circle mark. I've got percentage accounts on detail because what I want to do is change this to a shape and put percentage of accounts on shape. Then I can just click the shape mark. I can select all of them but 0.3. And then I'm going to pick this transparent shape. I got 6 of them in here, but you can't even see them. Doesn't matter which one I pick. Hit OK. And now I've isolated just this one mark. These shapes are still there. You can still hover over them, but it's a transparent shape. So I've isolated this without writing a calculation whatsoever. We might want to isolate the last mark in a line chart. I think that looks nice. This feels like a little busy for me. I don't want all these different circle marks. I just want to highlight the last mark, and maybe we'll label it or something like that. So I've created this calculation that basically says if the the order month is the fixed max of the order month, kind of like what we did in the table calculation section. So I'm going to just change this to a shape. I'm going to drag that true false calculation on the shape. I'm going to edit it. I'm going to make all the false calculations, the false results a transparent shape. And now we've isolated this last point. This is my favorite use case for transparent shapes. I have a presentation where I talk about 12 or 13 different use cases. I'm only going to talk about 4 today, but this is my favorite use case. We have these big numbers, people call them bands, right? And they're at the top of my dashboard just to kind of give some quick information. And every time I put them up there, my user clicks on it, goes, oh my gosh, what did I just do? I just broke Tableau. What's this big blue square? What is it alerting me to? And your users end up thinking that they broke something. And I never really liked that experience, why that blue square appears. So we can fix that really easily with a transparent shape. So instead of using a text mark, I'm going to use a shape mark. I'm going to come in here and change this shape to a transparent shape, hit OK. And now when I click on it, we have this more intentional experience. We don't have this big blue square being highlighted, right? So really nice experience with a transparent shape. Again, dozens and dozens of different use cases. Just search our website or look at the cool stuff link. And you can see lots of different uses for transparent shapes. Now, there are some other transparent things. You can set opacity. So this is that same chart I was showing before. And instead of putting this calculation on shape, I've got it as a true false, and I put it on color. So the false values are red and the last month is blue. What'd be really nice is if I could control the opacity of the red marks, but not the blue marks. Independently control the opacity of the red marks versus the blue marks, but that's not possible. Right now, if you go the opacity slider, it's all or nothing. You either get rid of everything or you show everything, or everything's in somewhere in the middle. That's not really what I want to do. Unfortunately, you can't control the different color transparency individually. Well, maybe you can. Sam mentioned it. He mentioned a transparent color. You can't color pick it or anything like that, but what you can do is create a custom color palette that gives you a transparent color, right? So if you ever use the preferences.tps file, if you haven't, just search for custom color palettes or go to Ken's link on the community custom color palettes. But color palettes consist of these hex codes, right? These just alphanumeric 6 digits to give you a specific color. Well, if you add a 00 after any of them, it turns that color code into a transparent color. So I list this as transparent white. It is white, that's transparent, but it's transparent, so you can't really tell that it's white at all. So how do we use this? Well, we can actually access it through our color palettes, not through this slider, but through our color palette. So I'm going to edit the color. For this false value, I'm going to come down here and pick this. It says transparent by Ken Flerlage, but I created it. I think he's trying to steal my stuff. Fair enough. But it shows black, but it's actually transparent color. If I apply it, you'll see that disappears. If I hit OK, these marks are still there, but they are transparent. So we've done that same chart 2 different ways, using a transparent shape, and this time using a transparent color. What can we use them for? Well, I've used them for a variety of cool reasons. I'm going to kind of do a silly one, but one of the good reasons for using transparent color is if you're layering charts. This may be, when I say layering, maybe it's a dual axis, maybe it is map layers. Layering allows you to sort of use, one example is in a hex map, you can do a dual axis or map layers, and you can show a discrete color palette with a continuous color palette. I've done that several times for different use cases. In this case, what I was doing was just something for Tableau Public, where I wanted to look at the places my family has traveled together. The requirement was we had to stay at least one night to be considered a state that we traveled to. And you can tell it's pretty lame. We really need to get out west a little bit more. I've traveled a lot of these different states, but as a family, we haven't really done as much as we'd like. So what I want to do is sort of edit this. I thought this was a nice little chart, but I thought it could look a lot better. So what I've done is I just edited the no colors, and I'm going to make those transparent. nope, I don't want to do that. I'm sorry. I'm going to make this white. And then I'm going to make the yes transparent. Hopefully I did that right. Hit OK. And then I'm just going to take down the opacity just a little bit. And then we're going to go back to this map and we'll see what I did is all the states we haven't been to have this transparent white, and everything that we have use this transparent color. That's really showing through in our map. Just a nicer effect than this. And the nice thing is you're not filtering out. Everything's interactive. You just made this transparent and left this slightly transparent white. Another use case is, this is something I did with parameter actions. You can just use this sort of slider bar to kind of mark your spot. The color before the reference line is blue, color after it is transparent. All right, so we've talked about transparent shapes. We've talked about transparent colors. We can also use transparent images in Tableau. So one use case is with hyperlinks. So if you type out an entire hyperlink, it will turn into a hyperlink. So I can click on this, we come here and go to this Wikipedia page. But if we typically don't want to type out this big long URL, right? What if I just wanted the hyperlink to be embedded on this Word Tableau software, right? So let's edit this, and you'd think maybe I could highlight this and right click and there would be some ability to add a hyperlink, but there isn't. So we can trick that. We can trick Tableau. So what I'm going to do is make it look like a hyperlink. I'm just going to make a blue and underline. Still not a hyperlink. I can't click it or anything like that. Then I'm going to float an image on top of it. I'm not going to resize it or anything. I'm going to center it. I'm going to choose a transparent shape. And then I'm going to paste that URL into it. And what that's done is I've overlaid this shape that you can't see when I put it in presentation mode. You can't see it, but when I hover over it, it's now a hyperlink. If I click on it, we now have a hyperlink to our website. Right? Cool little trick, and I'll consider this a trick that's invisible, is that even though you can't do it in desktop, there are some cool things you can do in Tableau Web Edit. One of the handful of features you can do in Web Edit that you can't do in Tableau Desktop. So what I can do in Tableau Web Edit is edit this text. I've got that URL copied. All I got to do is select it, hit Control V, hit OK, and we now immediately created a hyperlink right there in Tableau's Web Edit. So super cool trick that you can do in Web Edit that you can't do in Tableau Desktop. One of the things that a lot of people are doing is creating backgrounds in other tools. They're using Illustrator, using Figma. I like to use PowerPoint. This is an example of one where I created an image in another tool. You can see it's just one big image. But what I want to do is use these little things as navigation. So this is something I created for Tableau Public, just being totally silly. And I want to be able to go to these different dashboards just by clicking on this. It's just one big image. So we can use transparent images as navigation buttons. So I can drag this out. I'm going to cover it real quick. We're going to edit it. I want it to go to this PN dashboard. So I'm just going to set it to go to PN. I'm going to pick an image button, and then I'm going to go choose a transparent shape. Doesn't really matter which one I choose. So it's set to go to the PN dashboard, and it's transparent. So if I click on it, it goes to the PN dashboard. Really nice, right? And then we could do that for the other four. The problem being, if I go publish this and then go interact with it, that button that looks like this in desktop looks like this when I hover over it in on Tableau Public or Server or Tableau Online. Not a good user experience, really weird looking, almost makes your users think that they did something wrong. So we can change this, and we can use another transparent thing, and that's a blank character. A blank character is, I don't know how to describe it other than it's just blank. It's not a space, very different than a space. It is a character that's actually blank. In fact, we can, the one that works really, really well if you're using a PC is the Unicode character 2800. I actually have it down here. If I edit this text, you can't see it, but right there I've selected, I'm going to copy that blank character. So how does that help us in this situation? Well, like I said, we get this weird hover with a transparent shape. I can change this to a transparent, to a blank character, and we can resolve that. So instead of an image button, I'm going to make a text button. I'm going to change the background to none, and then I'm just going to paste this blank character into the title. Doesn't look any different than it did before, still works exactly the same, but when I publish it, your experience looks like this. When somebody hovers over it, it looks like this versus this. So much better end user experience. There's several other cool things you can do with blank characters. How many times have you built this chart? It's a really nice line chart, and then you add labels, and all of a sudden it just looks sloppy. These labels are just jammed almost right on top of this line chart. So you try to fix it. So let's just go to this label. Maybe I'll just add a couple spaces. I'm just hitting the space bar here, just add a couple spaces to the right just to pad it out. Hit OK, and absolutely nothing happens. Wonder why that is. Maybe it's some weird alignment. Maybe I need spaces on the left. Maybe I need to get rid of the spaces on the right and add the spaces on the left. Again, just hitting the space bar. Again, this one moves a little bit, but it may actually just made it worse. So how can we fix this? Well, we can do it using a blank character. So instead of spaces, I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to add a blank character. I just pasted 2 of them there, hit OK. And all of a sudden this thing is padded out just like we wanted it. I think it's a little too much. So I'm going to hit back off one of them. Now we have this really nicely formatted label. And that's just using this invisible blank character. Another use case is with tables. So this is looking at the world indicators data. I just got all these different metrics in a table by region and country and population, life expectancy. I like my headers to be centered. Pretty much every table I ever create, I want my headers to be centered. And these are all numbers. So I want my numbers to right align. So my decimal points line up, right? So what problem that causes is centered headers, right aligned numbers. So the numbers don't line up with the headers. You can see how far off these numbers are from the headers. And we may, and if we were using Excel, we may just go in there and highlight those cells and use the indent to fix that. But we can't really do that with Tableau, can we? So let's just try the spaces again. Maybe I can add a bunch of spaces out to the right. Again, hit apply, nothing happens. If I add a bunch of spaces to the left, yeah, it just kind of messes everything up. It doesn't work like we might expect it to. But you can pretty much guess what I'm going to do. If I come in here and just paste in, say 2, make a 3, blank characters, hit OK. Watch this when I hit OK. You can see these numbers, they are still right aligned, but they're indented essentially from the right. So they're centered up much better with their headers. So you still have centered headers and you have right aligned numbers. All right, we're at 1:59. I don't know that we're going to have time for questions, but I just wanted to say, thank you. And that's Andy Kriebel saying he's number 1. I do want to just say, thank you, Andy Kriebel, for being a good sport. He allowed us, we got his permission to do this. He was not being arrogant in any way. We just thought we'd have a little bit of fun with it. So if we have time for questions, happy to take them. If not, be happy to take them offline.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, you both have been doing an amazing job of answering questions when the other person was speaking. So I think we did a great job with the questions. Maybe quickly, if you could just speak to, you kind of mentioned that there's a version of your site, there's a section of your site that kind of goes through all of this stuff. Maybe if you could just go over that, just so people know where it's
share the URL again, Kevin.
Okay, I can do that. Just the cool stuff URL.
Yeah, and this just links to, there's a bunch of content that, blogs and things like that we use on this, some of our own, some of other people. So this URL, if you follow it, will get you to it will get you to the workbooks that we showed, and it will get you to links to all those blogs. So just scan through there and find what you're looking for. And not 100% of the stuff that we addressed here was in a blog, but the bulk of it.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. And I would say, because it is 2:00 and I appreciate everybody for joining us. Very quickly, 2 things that we always like to share. If you have a speaker that you're interested in seeing similar to these, definitely let us know. We are always looking for new speakers, new presentations. If you would like to speak, this is another place that you could share that. And our next presentation will be on the 27th. We're actually going to do that one in, we will update the timing there because I think we're going to do that one to be more useful to those in the APAC area. So that'll be Sam and I presenting that day. You can find all of the information about that at this link here. It's just the user group page /analytics. Otherwise, thank you again to Sam, Simon, Kevin, and Ken for all of the awesome work. You will also see tons of applause in the chat. But that's all I had. So thanks everyone for joining us. We will see you in October.
Thank you.
You.
Bye.